Welcome to Conversations on the Edge with Tom and TJ, where Generation X and Millennial discuss subjects like restoration, the Edge version 3, and the world. Learn how your job data can change your business, and have some fun with us too.
All right. So let's get started. This is our first podcast. I'm Tom. This is TJ, and we are very happy to be with you guys. We've got a whole bunch of stuff planned. This is our first podcast, and so we don't know what we're doing, and, and so we're making it up as we go. Part of the reason that for Conversations on the Edge is it's all about we're gonna talk about data, how it works for you, how it can change your business. We're gonna talk about world things. With friends and family and maybe even some celebrities. I'm going to be working on a couple astronauts to see if we can get them on here. As you can tell, we have space in the background. I'm here in Cape Canaveral, Florida. TJ's up in Tennessee. What part of Tennessee again, TJ? Is it
Knoxville, land of the free, buddy.
Yeah. Now is that UT? UT's in Knoxville. Yep.
Yep, the real UT.
Yeah.
I'm talking to anybody from Texas if they're listening.
You got a lot going on now with your quarterback went wacky and tried to get a couple more million or something, and that's another.
It's quite chaos around here because people live, eat, and breathe it.
Well, I can imagine, especially for an SEC school. It's like, the SEC Big Ten schools, they're not used to being told, and I think some of this, this money that's being paid to college kids now are, I think it's got some of them a little spooked. What's next? Where's it end? And, but, sports wise, I think they need to do some type of collective bargaining agreement with the universities and get with the players and have them do, I don't know, you're going to have to make them employees or something and put them under contract. So otherwise it's going to get nuttier than it is. But with Conversations on the Edge, and we can get down the road on sports all day long. Conversation on the Edge, we're going to be talking about how your data can change your business. The data that you are creating right now in your businesses and your restoration businesses, you're sitting on it. Because all the data that all of these software companies have all comes from your files, all comes from the projects that you are doing. And so what we want to do is demonstrate to you through our software, the Edge, how this can work for you very, very effectively and with not a whole lot of cost. And so we're going to talk about, the Edge software. We're going to talk about data, and we're going to pepper it in with a whole bunch of other stuff too. And so, TJ, how you doing? How's it going?
Good, man. I'm super excited to be talking about this with you. As you know, data, those in our industry haven't embraced data like if you look at any other service business. And so I think it's really going to be the next frontier for restorers, especially with the technology developments. I mean, a new restoration software comes out almost monthly,
Yep.
So the power that you're sitting on to know your own data and your own business and be able to predict and react quicker is going to be paramount.
Absolutely. And you can see in our title that we have Gen X, which would be me. I'm borderline Gen X and baby boomer, but I prefer Gen X and boomer. All the old people are boomers, but and obviously TJ is millennial. And what we have the perspectives that we have, when I started in restoration back in the 80s, it's totally different than what it is now. The business has, the industry has blown up, but in all reality, we're still doing the projects the way that we that we always did them. We're still cleaning, we're still drying, all of those things have always been there. We just have better equipment and sometimes better people. From my standpoint, from a Gen X standpoint, that change has just been incredible. And I'm not a get off my lawn guy, so I'm trying to stay as relevant and up to date on everything as possible, because I love technology. And but as much as I work with it, I can get around someone like you, TJ, and you make me look like a child, because it's just like, I'm over here tip-tacking away and you guys are done, and I think I'm doing good. And so it's going to be really, really good to, talk with you about all of these things that we're doing, and about where we came from and how we got where we are now, and how it all fits together, because you can't have the future without the past. And our past in restoration was, the Wild West. When I came into the business, we were, we didn't have there were no training courses or anything. It was all in-house. There wasn't what we have now. Thank God, there's a starting point for everybody coming into the business, and that's what certificates are, and all the training that we get. That's what all of that is a starting point, because until you get experience on projects, it really doesn't add up to anything, because you don't have that, you don't know anything. Because the number one thing to remember is that, it's not about, certificates is about, do you know what you're doing? And so that's what we're really going to be focusing on here also. And so from a millennial standpoint, what are some of the pain points that you see out there in the industry today?
Well, I know for me, technology is an amazing thing, right? But I have found, and I'm guilty of this myself in my own business, like you can get shiny object syndrome very easily, and it can actually cripple you if you're using too much technology and just complicating your processes. And there's the expense side of it, but there's the business continuity and the smoothness of your operations, where technology can help, but it can also hurt you too. And so that's one thing I've seen. And you talk about going back, to the fundamentals of how you used to do it. That's kind of the approach that I've taken. And the edge is part of that. Time and material estimating is part of that, and billing, and tracking that data. You look at every other business, especially service-based businesses, they're tracking their production rates, they're tracking their costs. And that's the biggest issue I see with a lot of my peers, is they don't even know their cost data or their inputs into this work or their margins. And so to harness that data and be able to use it and make strategic decisions, I think that's why you have so much variation, and why a lot of restorers, they can't break that $1 million to $5 million revenue mark, because they don't even know their own data in their own business.
Yeah.
So technology is good, but it can also be crippling.
Well, it's only as good as, I always say it's garbage in, garbage out. And
Right.
so if you don't have good information going in, you're not going to get good information coming out, no matter what. And one of the things that's always been one of the most difficult things in our industry is getting people to do their homework. Getting the documentation on the projects. There's always that, the dog ate my homework. Oh, we're working 18-hour days. We don't have time to do the paperwork. You have to do the paperwork, because if you're cramming it in the last minute, it's just like, when you're in college.
Not getting done.
No, yeah, it's just like when you're in college, you're cramming for a course,
Right.
in the last minute. I know it never worked for me. There were some people that could do that, but you have to be on top of your data, because your data is telling you everything. It's telling you how you're performing. You're referring to labor production rates. And every industry in the world uses labor production rates. They all focus on, what one person or robot can do in a certain period of time.
Machine. Yeah.
And why, as restorers, we don't do that as much as we should. Now, if you've been through my class like you have, TJ, that's I preach production rate. Know your production rate. Know what your people are doing on a daily basis. Because if you don't, you're just driving. You're just driving along. It's like, oh, the invoice will be what it's going to be. Well, it's going to be a problem. Is what it's going to be. But if you look at like companies like Amazon knows to the nth degree exactly what they're going to expect out of each robot or person working in their facility. And they do that for a reason, because they're managing their money. They're managing their bottom line as well as their top line. A lot of restorers, they operate on it is what it is basis. And so they're in their invoice will show up like that. And so you'll see
After the
that.
fact too. Yeah. After the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. In 30 to 40 days after the job. And then they'll wonder why we're not getting paid and all this stuff. Well, you're not getting paid because you just added 30 to 40 days to your pay cycle. And so that's one of our other things that we preach a lot about is invoice as quickly as you can. If you're on a big project, make sure you're periodically invoicing. Ask for money up front. If you don't ask, you don't get. And it's very important that we make sure that we're in control of our projects, in control of the invoice, and in control of the production. Are we producing what we said are we doing what we said we were going to do? And are we producing at a rate where we're making money? And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't paying attention. The number one thing that gets contractors in trouble is labor. Too much labor on the job. And most people aren't really thinking about, wow, we put everybody that we needed. Well, but is that who you needed? And so, or
Yeah. How do you know what you needed?
Yeah. What are you basing that on?
Yeah.
And so it's very important. And we'll as we go through our podcast series, we'll go through all of that. So if you're listening for the first time and you've never been through one of my classes, you're going to learn a lot. Everything that we have done, the best practices over the last 40 years. I started in 1986, and I can't believe, that I'm refusing to believe that I'm as old as I am. But you're only as old as you feel, I guess, or young as you feel, whatever that is. But in that case, I still. My body feels 61. My mind is still 30 something.
It's all right. I refuse to grow up too, Tom.
Well, I have a sign in the tiki bar. It says, what does it say? It says, you can grow up, but you can be immature forever. It's right next to my mug.
Awesome.
So from a Gen X standpoint, though, what do you think that these guys, what your competitors and your peers, labor production rates, one of them. What's another thing that they need to pay more attention to? And maybe the old school can kind of help out there too.
Well, if you look at the number one complaint just across the board from fellow restorers is getting paid, right? And a lot of that starts from the actions and processes that you have in place day one. What do your contracts look like? Because a work authorization isn't necessarily a legally binding contract, because it doesn't have a price. It doesn't have a time for performance. And if you look at the legal standards in most states, those are two critical components that you have to have for a binding contract.
Mhm.
And so understanding, the legal side of it, but also the carrier's side of it and their obligation to indemnify their policyholders, a blank work authorization does not create any kind of cost incurred, right?
Yes, a work authorization is not a contract. It's a contract if it has your rate sheets attached to it and your T&M and a T&M contract to it. Then you're talking. Now, are they going to sign everything when you get started? No, they can sign the work authorization. Work authorization is just authorizing you to walk through the door.
Right.
But you want to make sure that everybody has buy-in from the very beginning, and buy-in meaning skin in the game. So if the owner of the building is now signing that contract, obviously he's going to have his attorney look at it and everything, and that's what we want, because that gets everybody interested. If you walk in there and you don't have the right paperwork signed, a third party consultant can walk on that job and have you removed, because legally you're not even in the game. And so
Right.
they can have you removed, say thank you very much, give us your invoice, thank you for your emergency services, see you on the next one. And make sure we have everything signed from the very beginning of the project, because that's where it all starts. Invoicing.
Yeah, so you look at the pain points of getting paid, it really starts on day one.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah,
being
absolutely.
able to provide, a written scope with, a ROM
Mm-hmm.
and communicate that, efficiently and quickly, because you've got emergency services that need to start. So you've got to have processes in place to be able to do that quickly,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah, invoicing starts at the very beginning of the project, like you said, and it starts with your estimate. And it actually starts with the damage assessment, then your estimate, then your scope of work, and then everything follows in there. So from estimating to invoice, there's that red thread, that commonality between everything that you're going to do on the job. And so everybody that you have on the job is not only operations or sales or everything. So even your people in your invoicing department have the same power, and you want to have them have that same power as everybody else, that same knowledge, that same way to look at the job and say, well, why did we produce, at a lower rate on this project compared to this other project? And all of that stuff is related to, getting paid on time and producing a good invoice. Because your invoice has to tell the story of the job. A complete stranger should be able to pick up your job information, your job file, and be able to reconstruct that project from beginning to end. And because everybody has to remember, there's a lot of data that's already out there. The first time that you do a job isn't the first time that job has been done. It might be the first time that you do a hotel, but that a hotel has been done, thousands of times in the history of restoration. And so all of that data is out there. So use it, and it will show up in your invoices. And what happens is all of a sudden your invoices will be tighter, and the red flags won't go up, and you won't be audited as much as you are. The problem is we kind of have created our own mess as restorers when it comes to invoicing.
I agree. And another thing is communication.
Yep.
If you don't know this data during the job, you should know it every day. And that should be communicated to your client, right?
Mm-hmm.
On a daily basis, what your burn rate is. So if you're not communicating daily and being able to track this stuff, you're just running in the wind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know how people do it, and I know for me personally, I've always been an ops guy. I've been in operations all my career, and I do sales. I'm not a salesman. I'm not one of those guys that wakes up every morning, wanting to sell something. I'm one of those guys that wakes up every morning. I want to solve something. I want to figure something out, and how do we make that happen? And and so, because of that operations background, I was always, a project manager and some of my mentors were all real data guys too. So they kind of grounded into me that paperwork is everything. The job doesn't matter if you do bad. You can do a great job in bad paperwork, and the only thing that people are going to remember is your bad paperwork. And and so I grew up, even back, I got my first laptop in 1993 at the World Trade Center, when we were doing the World Trade Center in 1993 after the first terrorist attack. And that was when I discovered spreadsheets, and Excel was still expensive and kind of, I don't even know if it had gone. It was still kind of a commercial product. I don't even know if it had gone mainstream yet. And so that's when I figured out that, man, I can track all my costs. I can track my job. I can create a critical path. And so, it was early 90s, that I got on my first laptop. The company wouldn't buy me one because I was an on-call project manager. And so I had to buy my own. I think it was like $2,000 at the time. And it was a Tandy from Radio Shack. And so, but I was happy as could be with it, because it was like, wow. But I don't even think you could turn it on today. I don't even think it would function today. There's more power in our smartphones than I had in that doggone thing. But to me, it was awesome. It had a liquid crystal screen on it about this big. It was horrible, but it worked. And, I created spreadsheets and moving, tracking job costs. What are we making on the job? Are we making any money on this job? I always wanted to know where the invoice was, at any given time, and not just at the end of the job.
Yep.
And now, everybody, there's really no excuse now for the poor documentation that we have on jobs, because of the computers that we have, all of the software that we have. We have some incredible tracking software out there. We're going to talk about the Edge here in a little bit. For those who aren't familiar with it, you're going to be very familiar with it. But it drives me crazy that we are still having these same issues with documentation that we were having back in the 80s. And back before, we didn't even have pagers, for Christ's sake. We had to find a payphone to make a phone call. Shoot, you can.
Yeah, so imagine transitioning from that to now with, this is a perk of the technology. Like, in our operation, we're completely paperless, and we're still tracking all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's made it so much more efficient.
Yeah. It's all you have to, you just have to do it,
and create the processes around it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Just do it, I'll give it to Nike, but you just have to, just do it, stop.
Yeah. Create the structure. Yep.
Yeah.
For people to perform it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really it's exciting times in restoration, and in the world in general. There's so much potential, so many things, and now we have AI in the middle of everything too. That, man, I'm like, I'm one of those old guys. I can't wait, till the the driverless car, pulls up out front like the Jetsons. It just takes me where I want to go. Because there's going to come a time where I'm ready, and, Jetsons, whatever. But all
in reality, like the day of AI generating estimates or ROMs and collecting this data for you based off of the inputs that your team provide, and just carrying one of these things around in your pocket on a job site, and it can track everything, is not that far off. And, there might be a day where robots are doing demo, and I'm excited for that,
I think there's a lot of stuff, you're looking at, there's our business is not rocket science, and one of the things that that happens is we have people that we know in our industry and companies that we know. They try to make it into rocket science, and it's not. They try to make it more complex than it is, and it's not. We're still cleaning and drying, rebuilding, and tearing out. And it's that hasn't changed. How we're doing it has changed, but in all reality, we're working less efficient now than we were back in the '80s. Um, and now we have all these different issues and stuff that we might have with labor that hopefully won't affect our business, but you never know. And so we have to be as efficient inside our own businesses to make inside our own companies so that we're resilient to any of those outside influences that might be negative.
I mean, if you want to have any kind of competitive edge, you have to know your data. It's as simple as that.
If you don't know who you are, how can you walk onto the field or onto the court and compete with anybody?
Right.
It's like Michael Jordan had a saying, and I love it. And he said, "If you are not ready to play when you get on that court, I will dominate you." And that's where data comes in, and it gets you ready to get on the court, but it also gets you to where you're creating that damage assessment up front. You're creating an airtight damage assessment, which leads to a tight scope of work, which leads to your estimate, a good solid number, which then should lead into your production of it. And all of the production rates that were used to create your estimate should now be used for the production. And then that way, when you get to the invoice, you already know what it's going to be. And we just got to get everybody there. We're going to get everybody there one step at a time. And what you've done with your data is awesome, and I can't wait for you to show everybody here, TJ, in a little bit. And what we have seen with our Edge users, and if you're not familiar with our software, the Edge V3 is our estimating software. It's the fastest estimating software in the industry, and it's that way because we focus on labor production rate and what people can produce on a daily basis. And because we focus on that, it's a universal tool. And so it can be used anywhere in the US, Canada, Australia, UK, wherever. It's all based on your data and on your numbers, on your pricing. And so we're gonna have a lot of fun going through all of the new updates. We're constantly updating our software. Got some new updates that are on there right now. We're working the bugs out. If for everybody that knows anything about software, it's in constant evolution, and each click on the evolution, there's bugs that come with it. And so we're working bugs out right now.
Yeah, but that's going to be any software, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you're.
Well, it comes from you, and it comes from people like you, TJ, that call us up and say, "Hey, can you do this? Can we do that?" And so that's where we're at right now, and we come to you guys. You're the ones that tell us what the update is going to be. We don't.
Refreshing.
Yeah. I'm
Versus,
just an idea.
The carriers dictating how we do it, right?
Yeah. I'm just an idea guy. I bring stuff put an idea out there, and somebody helps me bring it to life. And that's what you've done, TJ, and what you've done with the Edge is fantastic. And I cannot wait for people to see what you've done and where we're going, because that's what we've done is great, but where we're going is incredible.
I agree. I'm excited for it.
All right, we are back, and what we did was we we opened up the Edge V3, and inside the Edge, and you heard us talk about labor production rate. And what that means is what we know from historical data over the last 40 years, that every building, every type of facility that we will work on has a labor production rate starting point. And with that, we're just going to walk you through and show you how quickly this works. And again, this is a universal system. It can be used anywhere in the UK, the US, and you'll see we have metric and imperial. That's for our friend, or the metric rate is for everybody in the UK and everywhere except here in the US, where we're using the imperial rates. So we're going to just walk through just quickly. We're going to say Holiday Inn. This is one of my favorite case study scenarios to kind of give you, and how quickly we can put together a budget number on a Holiday Inn. And so we're going to pick hospitality, but you'll see every type of facility is in here, from hospitality down to library. And so hospitality, we're going to have a starting point of 305 square feet per person per day is what that represents. And each one of these facilities has a different starting point because each one of these facilities is different. Hospitality has a little bit higher production rate. The reason that is because of heads and beds. They want you in and out of their building as quickly as possible because they want heads in their beds. So as opposed to, say, a hospital wants heads in beds, yes, but they want to know who's in our hotel, who are they qualified to be here? There's a lot more that goes into it. And so they're not going to just let you come in and go to work. You have to pass their test. And so hospitality, we're going to go, it's easy. We're going to do fire and water. And each thing that we're going to select here based on our historical data is going to affect our production rate. You can see it'll continue to go down. We're going to select, most of the Holiday Inns today are 7 to 8 stories. So we're going to go with that. Content concentration. We have different levels of content concentration. Level 1, open facility, congested facility, heavily congested facility. And again, data will dictate to you. We're just going to go to a level 3. Again, what we're selecting here are everything that relates to the project. And this is dictating our labor production rate. Because remember what we said earlier, production rate is used in every manufacturing facility in the world to this day and has been for a very long time. What we've done is we've introduced it to the restoration industry. So we've taken data from over the years to create a tool that works today. So essentially, we were AI before AI was a buzzword, and so we were just keeping it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Contaminant level, we're going to also select a level 3 on this. You also have choices of level 1, 2, 3, fire, water, mold. We can always schedule a demo. You can demo with us. We're just going to walk through this real quick, just like if I were doing this right now, just to show you how quickly the system works. Again, we're collecting on everything that applies to this job. So we're going to do the elevator system, which is going to be the elevator shaft as well as the carriage. We're going to do false air, which is going to be everything above our drop ceilings. Content manipulation, we're going to clean all the contents. Debris removal and HVAC. So we're going to leave that there at 160 is our. So it's going to change our starting point here in the Edge and the estimating tool. We've already entered in our 90,000 square feet because the average Holiday Inn in North America is 90 to 100,000 square feet. We're going to say that they told us we have 18 working days to get out of their hotel because they want heads in beds. They want to be back in business and all of the above. So with that, with entering in our total square footage, our working days, and our production rate, it's already calculated our estimate. Now we've come in and already added in some information, but these are our three main categories: our production rate, our days to do the job, and our total affected square footage. So we added in our water techs, safety. You can add in as much labor as you want. All these labor rates in here are just for demo. These are the labor rates that you use when you're using the Edge, are all based on what your rates are, whether you're in New York, LA, whatever it is, whatever your rates are, is what you can even use Xactimate rates in here if you want. It doesn't matter. You can see that we've adjusted our associated cost. For example, we're in a hotel. We're going to be using a lot of our company-owned equipment. This is going to be our air movers, our air scrubbers, everything, mop buckets, all of our company-owned equipment. Subcontractors, subsistent. This is going to be travel, our per diem, hotels. If we were doing a local job, we would just drop this down to 5. So let's say we're local, we're not on the road to where we're going to have travel. We'll drop that down to 5 because that's going to give us cushion then to absorb some of our travel time, on our daily basis. So we've added in some subcontractors. Again, we just want to show you how quickly this works. We had some vital documents on the job, where we did some vital documents. We did some 10,000 square feet that we're going to do some deskets on. We use our square footage number. You'll also see in here we have Chuck DeWald's. We got with Chuck and we extracted out of E3 because we work on square footage numbers, and so we extracted out. So if you're familiar with E3, you can use the formulas in here to give you a square footage number. And we just used our square footage number in here, our default of 375, 10,000 square feet. So out of that hotel, we're 10,000 square feet of it, we're going to use a deskant. The rest of it, we're going to use our small equipment up here in our company-owned equipment. So we're going to swing down here. We have our deodorization. We had a fire and water job, so 55 cents a square foot. This is a square footage number that we worked out. We had two totally different methods of deodorization, one hydroxyl, one ProCure. And this was a happy medium between the two prices, between the two methods, so that the user, you can utilize the data that we've put together and the best practices that we put together. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've already invented the wheel. We want you to go and make it better. All right, so 55 cents, and we actually did this an update with hydroxyls with our friends at Airbotics, and our number is spot on. So we're still good even after COVID and all this stuff. Our 55 cents a square foot is spot on there, because this is built to give you power to put together an estimate, a ROM, in a fraction of the time. If you call me up with all the data, we can literally put together an estimate in 15 to 20 minutes, no problem. Our last step here is going to be general recon. This is where you can add in, if you have drywall. These are all blend rates out of Xactimate from Southern California. You can put your own rates in here. If you have your own system, your own prices you want to put in here. Any line item things that you want to add in here, like COVID cleaning, disinfecting, 25 cents a square foot. You can plug all of that in here. Again, we're blowing through this here. Custom fees, and we have our taxes. I always recommend always put taxes, include taxes in your estimate. On big jobs, that can be a big deal. And you'll see in here we added this estimate range. And so you can actually plug in here, say on our projects, we want to have our range. Because I always recommend that when you're putting together an estimate that you have a range number. And so this was a request from a client, a large client out in Southern California. They wanted to have, they give it all, they give their ROM numbers as a range. And so you can see a low estimate, high estimate here. That's our range. So when we're talking to the adjuster, we can tell them that our range is going to be between 784 and 950. Never get yourself tied down, especially that first number that you give to anybody. Never get yourself tied down to that first number. Because if you give that first number, that's the only number that they're going to remember. So make sure it's a range. And I know, TJ, you know this well, and we're going to turn it over to you here in a second. But never give out that number. And so here would be our median estimate. This is what would be our estimate number for this Holiday Inn based on the information that we put into it. So you can see how quickly we put that together and how quickly now we're ready. See, once you take the number, the estimate off of your plate, now you can focus on the scope of work and write a good scope, which would be the next step, which is our scope right here. And you can just go through it. There's a template here. You can upload your own scope, your own information in here. This one is loaded up with about 8 pages of information. And the beautiful thing is we have this button right here. If you have a scope from a past project that you want to plug in, maybe another Holiday Inn that you did, you just click on it, do the drop down, and pull your scope from whatever project you want. I've got a lot of test projects in here, and you just throw it in here and import it, and boom, there it is. And you're ready to go. Export out, and it's that quick. The beautiful thing is, since it's based on historical data, all of the formulas in the Edge we have been using since 1998. So this isn't something that Tom made up or pulled out of his you-know-what. This is real. And it's been real for the last 30 years. And there are companies, TJ's is one of our star users. We have a company that has done over 600 estimates in the Edge over the last year and a half, since 2023. And so just fantastic, where guys are using it, not only for the estimate, not only for the whole package, but using it on the front end and TJ's going to tell you about this here in a second, is using it on the front end to create your ROM, and then working in with your Xactimate on the back end. This will give you your ROM number in about 20 to 30 minutes. And so once you have all your data, or faster, I'm being modest.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want them to know is it's an art, and it allows you to give yourself some variance, especially by providing that range. I like to be conservative and, estimate on the high side and then over deliver and come in lower.
Yep.
Because that's where you really show your value.
Yes. And all of the changes that we make to the Edge are based off of users. And, like I said, I just have ideas and people bring them to life. The users like you, TJ, are the next generation of bringing this to a whole nother level, which is really exciting. And so that's a brief overview of the Edge. Now we're going to take a pause right here, and then we're going to come back, and TJ is going to take it from there. So we're going to pause. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. Thank you for that. That was a real quick run through with the Edge. If you want a full demo, just get a hold of me. You'll see my information popping up on the screen here. Just get a hold of me. We'll schedule it. But that is from me. All right. So this tool adds so much power to your estimating. It's unbelievable. And what we've seen with our users, over the last 2 years, it's just fantastic. Gives me goosebumps thinking about, how everybody is using it. And it's not just for large loss. And so a lot of people might think, oh, that's just a large loss tool. It's just part of large loss mastery. It is not. This is a tool that can be used on any size project. And TJ is going to take it here in a second and talk to you and actually show you, how it works on smaller projects. And I think TJ, I think he said that the smallest job that you can get down to 500 square feet, it's a 500 square foot job. And then and so it's not built to go below 500 square feet. And so, and actually ATI told me that same thing. They called me, I was in Australia, and they called me in the middle of the morning. I think it was 3 a.m. And they called me and they said, hey, yeah, we're plugging in this, 500 square foot. I think it was a 600 square foot mold job. Yeah. And I said, all right, well, it'll work. It was originally built for commercial projects, but what we've found is it works on all projects. Any project that you have labor on, if it's reconstruction, if it's asbestos, if it's mold, fire, water, it doesn't matter, because all of those jobs have a labor production rate. And so, TJ, I've talked enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a prime example of that, right, Tom? Because I'm not a large loss guy by any means. Do we do commercial and large losses? Yes, but the bulk of our work is residential, and we have taken the edge and applied it to that as well. And it just, because again, estimating is an art, not a science. You just have to learn the skills of estimating with the edge, and you can apply it across the board to any job you do. So that's what we've done in my company. And we're tracking all the data on all our projects. After a job's complete, we're tracking, the affected square footage. How many people did we have on the job, and how many days did it take us? And those are your three components of your production rate. And we know whether it's water or fire or mold, what our production rate on average is across the board. And so if you look at our data set, I'm not going to share my screen here, but I'm going to pull it up and just see what my average production rate is across the board. And it's about 116, which is, residential is a little bit slower production rate just because of the confined spaces, the furniture.
Yep.
It's not a wide open commercial facility, like a hotel. So your production rate is going to be slower, and that's reflected in, our average across almost 120 jobs that I have this data on. So, but the reason I love the edge is, you look at every service-based business that provides services on site that is getting paid immediately. You're providing a proposal up front, right? And that is something that our industry has gotten away from. And, in terms of being an ethical in business and providing a high level of customer service, we love to be able to provide that price, whether it's a range or, just the single ROM number. It's still providing your customer with a scope and an idea on what this is going to cost, the scale and scope of this project. And, we're looking, I have a great example right now. And if you don't mind, Tom, I'd love to share my screen here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the beautiful thing about this tool is it's not just for big projects.
Right.
And what I love what you've done, TJ, is you've ran with it, and you are guiding us into what the next generation of the edge is going to be.
Yeah, and we can talk about, the future of the edge and, what
Mm-hmm.
I hope to be able to accomplish with it. But, and looking at this is a residential fire, it's a 3,700 square foot house.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll take us, 2 to 3 weeks of 16 working days. And I've adjusted my production rate based on the historical data in my business that I've already captured, right? My average is around that 115,
Mm-hmm.
but this house is also empty. It doesn't have any content in it now. So when we go to produce this job, you know, especially estimating with the edge on residential, you're going to have to add supplemental labor, right? For your production teams because you can't, unlike a commercial facility, you can't just throw 20 people in a residence and work efficiently. Like the rooms are just too small and confined, the
Yep.
entries, the exits, you have your safety. So all of that. But by knowing the data inside my business, for example, on my supplies, I know that on average in my company, most jobs that we do, 15% of our labor is consumables.
Mm-hmm.
I know with a high degree of certainty because we track the data that our equipment falls in the 30 to 40 percentile of our labor, right? Your subcontractors is easy. You have that data and those relationships in your business. And of course, we're not traveling. So this example right here, are we a little high on a square foot basis? We might be, but like I told you, our style of estimating is conservative in that we like our clients to be fully educated and fully aware of what the cost could be,
Mm-hmm.
before we start.
Yep.
And so this project is a great example because we were able to do this ROM very quickly. I think it took me 15, 20 minutes to put this together. I was able to provide an accurate scope and a contract that when you package those together, you have a binding contract. And the power of that in this scenario is we sent this to the insurance company and requested a draw on the
Mm-hmm.
job before we've even started on a
Mm-hmm.
residential loss. We're asking for 20% to start mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the power, it would, could someone write this in another unit pricing software, off of a macro, fairly quickly? Yeah, probably. But the speed, I would have beat my competition to the table with our complete package and scope of work in comparison. So I just love this tool. I can't wait till we get to a point where, you're estimating on site with the edge and being able to provide this to the client straight to their email as part of your workflow while you're standing there with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Uh,
that's that's the beauty and the power of it. I mean, we've gotten so used to taking forever to put together our estimates that I hear from some people are like, well, why do I don't need to I don't need to put my number that quick, and it's like, well, yeah, you do. You do need to do that, but we've just gotten so used to it. Yeah, it takes like 2 or 3 days to put together an estimate. It's like, are you kidding me? And because it didn't, didn't for us in the past, we were, we didn't have the technology we have, but we were always figuring out where our numbers were. And so, but with the way the industry has grown up over the last, 20 years, they're getting used to just, this lag that doesn't need to happen because time is money. None of us have too much time on our hands, and nobody, none of us has like, oh, well, but the number, especially on projects, it's very important to have that ROM number up front. Then you can relax. Then you can put together the scope of work, and you can put together, the work plan for the client. Every client is different, and we want to
yep.
make sure that we're doing the best job that we can. If we're worried about numbers, then we're not worried about the right things on the job.
Yeah, and so that's externally, right, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
So even internally, knowing your business, I'm going to share my screen here again.
Mm-hmm.
This is the data that I've tracked internally inside my business, so you can see over time, you know, year to date, our production rate's around 115,
Mm-hmm.
but this month we're at 132. We're
Yep.
getting more efficient because we're paying attention to the data.
Yep. Yep. It's shocking sometimes when some of the guys that I deal with, some of the companies that we deal with on, they're in the 30s, you know, 30 square feet per day. And there's going to be projects that are like that. There's going to be
Yep, certainly.
challenges that you're going to have, like, man, how do we do that?
Yep.
But not on an average job. On an average job, I mean, 30 square feet. I mean, that's less than, a sheet of plywood. Like we always say, a sheet of plywood is 32 square feet. And if you can't clean or take care of more than 32 square feet per day, then if that's what you're producing, then you have to expect a problem on every single one of your invoices.
Yep.
Because, and if you don't know what we're talking about when it comes to production rate, and you've never thought about, okay, what is it, what's it, what are we producing? How much are we producing? How much should we produce on a daily basis? Then you're missing a key element to the business.
Well,
Um,
the people that are looking at your job files, the first thing that a lot of adjusters do is look at what your price is per square foot.
yeah,
And if it's out of line, by a standard or two deviations, it's an immediate red flag for an audit on your file. And you're not doing yourself any favor whatsoever. It's immediate resistance.
yeah, yeah. It, it I can't stress it enough. And we'll have Joe Whites with Joe with JS Held will be joining us here over the next few weeks. And he'll talk about red flags, and he'll talk about all the things that we're talking about right now. Um, the first thing that we do, and I'm a third party audit or a third party consultant, and I do get files. I don't get as many as I used to, um, and so you get them. And the first thing that you do is, what's the square footage number? And how do you do that? You just take the total of the job, total of the total value of the job, divide it by your square footage of the job, and that'll tell you what your square footage number is. It's that easy. And that's the first thing that a third party consultant does, because that's the first red flag. So if we open up that file and you do that quick calculation, it tells you it's $25 a square foot, and you're looking at it, and it's a warehouse project, and it doesn't fit the historical data, and these are the things that this is the gap that AI is going to be closing in the next 12 to 18 months, um,
Right.
to where everybody's going to be thinking about square footage. It's not just going to be, Tom and Large Loss Mastery preaching it. It's going to be everywhere, because it's already there. The restorers just don't know it. They're not using it. The square footage numbers have been there forever. That's the first thing that we do on files, and that tells us, all right, this should be a $6 job. Why is it a $20 per square foot job? Or it should be a $10 per square foot job. Why is it a $40 per square foot job? And so it has to fit it has to fit the categories, have the numbers have to fit. And remember, the numbers don't lie. And so when you get somebody with experience that's been on a lot of projects, it shows, because you get a lot of some of the young restorers, and they pump out their chest, because they're real proud that they did this big hotel job, and like it's the only time it's ever been done. And no, it's been done thousands of times, and all that data is out there, and it's so that's what you get compared against. Well, how you did the job might be the greatest thing ever, but how does it compare to how it's been done in the past 1,000 times before?
And the nice part is, using the edge up front doesn't dictate how you actually provide your invoice. Like if you have a relationship and they want to see it in a unit-based format with line items, you can still do your invoice that way because the data that system uses is still fundamentally based off of production rates.
Yep. And even Xactimate is based on production, right? Yield,
right.
And
there's several jobs where we're using the edge up on the front end to come up with our ROM, but we're invoicing in that format, on the back end.
Yep. And it's a companion tool to Xactimate. And so for all of our Xactimate users and friends, it is a tool that can work on your front end to give you your ROM. And then as you have time, then you can work in with your Xactimate. So you can do it on the front end. We have a lot of clients that is exactly, what they do. All right, so we got TJ back with us. And where we left off was I was talking to what I was telling everybody, TJ, was the front end, where people are using, especially like in CAT, when you have, 30 jobs a day coming in, you got to do an estimate on each one of them and all that. You can run your ROM numbers with the Edge far quicker than you can with anything else. So it works as a companion tool to Xactimate or Instability or whatever tool that you're using. This is a totally different system, but they can all work together very effectively.
Yeah, we do it every day. I mean, we run them side by side on almost every job.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well, and that was my conversations with some of our other users this week, with the guys that have done over 600 estimates in there. That's exactly what they literally use the Edge on every single job that they do, and then they back in the Xactimate, after they've done their ROM number through the Edge. And so it's really exciting, and I'm thrilled.
You get good when you get really good at estimating with the Edge. I mean, there's been several jobs that we hit, right on the money, almost the exact dollar amount within a couple $100.
Well, and that's the key. The more you use it, the more powerful it becomes, and the more powerful you become at estimating. Because as much as we introduce AI and we do all this other stuff, AI is going to be really cool. We don't even know what's going to happen there. Hopefully, it's not going to be Terminator or anything like that. I'm going to have to go buy some weapons. But so hopefully,
no, I think it's just going to only help us gain efficiencies in our businesses. Like if you look at the technician's job to not only document what they're doing, but to actually produce, it's going to cut down that documentation burden by, even if you cut it in half, that's a massive improvement in your production rates.
Yep. It's so important. The labor production rate is, like we said, it's been around forever. Even if you went all the way back to the Egyptians and the pyramids, what did they need to know? They needed to know, all right, so how many people does it take to move a 10-ton rock? How many people does it take to move a 5-ton rock? How many 100-ton, whatever it is? How many people do we need to do that? And whether they were using a calculation, which I'm sure that they were, because most of everything that they did was by calculation, they knew what their labor production was. So if they were doing it centuries ago, then I think every restorer in the world should be considering what their labor production rate is and what they're producing on a day-to-day basis, and are they profitable? Because a lot of times some guys just aren't profitable. They're pricing themselves, they're creating their top line so high because they don't know what their bottom line is going to be. So they're just cranking that top line. In the meantime, somebody, a consultant or an adjuster is going to look at that top line and go, all right, so we did a job just like this last year for half this price. Why is it, twice as much this year? And you have to have a reason. Now, if you have a reason, then sure. But if you don't, then you're going to have an issue with your invoice.
I love having the conversation with adjusters that know production rate and square footage pricing, because I can literally walk them through the methodology and how I created that wrong, and tell them, this is the production rate that I assumed, and this is where we're at kind of square footage.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking to somebody and you're speaking the same language, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm in line with that. Makes sense.
Yep.
And there's always going to be complexities and limitations that you run into, but you can't predict that stuff, and that's why you give yourself some kind of variance and wiggle room.
Mm-hmm. It's very important. Very important. Number one, we know our numbers. Number two, we give ourselves wiggle room. So when there's changes in our scope and variances in the project, that we can shift. And we can shift without hurting our business and hurting our bottom line. All of those things are so important.
Well, it only helps your reputation too as a restorer. You're coming at the entire project with your client, any consultant or adjuster, and you're fully transparent. Yep. There's nothing to hide. Yep. So that's what I love about it.
Yep. Well, when there's nothing to hide, that you're going to get paid. When you're not playing a shuffle game where you don't know where you are, and that's why you got to do as much of the work and speak to the listener. Do as much work as you can on your own so that you understand what's going on in your project, because the human factor is the one factor that is going to remain no matter how wild things get with AI. The human factor is always going to be the number one factor. And we want that in our business. We don't want AI determining what our jobs cost. We don't want that. We want a human factor in there because that's the competitive edge to estimating, is the human factor. If you take that out, there's no more edge.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, if you take that out, you're just a robot. Nothing against robots. Robots are good.
But you're never going to eliminate people from the equation in this industry. So, despite all the AI and robotic technology, like, the human factor is not going to go away in its entirety in this business.
It can't. And we don't want it to. We don't, you want to be competitive on your estimates. And if you're outsourcing everything and you're not doing your own homework, you're doing your own proposals, then how do you run your projects? How do you understand that there's something wrong or something's not working? And everybody has to be on the same page, from the guy who estimated a job to the person who runs the job to the person who invoices the job. Everybody has to be on the same page.
And if you don't have that budget to work on, you don't even have anything to track against.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So any other things you want to throw in there? We're kind of coming to the end of our first podcast here. I think we might have to divide this into a two-part. So if it's a two-part, then it's a two-part. If it's not, then it's our first one.
Well, I mean, the only other thing that I would say is just a testament to your career in this industry and the education that you provide. When I came to your class about a year ago, I didn't know anything about production rate. I was doing what everybody else is doing, using Xactimate and kind of guessing in the wind. And what you brought to my business has been transformative, So I couldn't recommend going to your class and learning the fundamentals of this data for yourself.
Thank you, TJ. And
Of course, man.
I owe you a steak and a beer. I did not tell him to say that.
That's right.
Well, all right. Our first podcast. All right. That wasn't so bad.